Good afternoon, and welcome to the Middle East Forum's weekly podcast series. My name is Lauri Regan, and on behalf of MEF, I want to thank you all for joining today and for your continued support for the critically important work that we do. We are joined this afternoon by Eitan Fischberger, who is an Israel-based open source intelligence analyst and writer specializing in uncovering terror networks and foreign disinformation campaigns. His work has a particular focus on malign Qatari influence in the West, and his writings have been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Fox News, and other major outlets. This afternoon, Eitan will be discussing Qatar's regional strategy and modus operandi of using doublespeak to manipulate audiences, operating as both arsonist and firefighter, and fueling regional turmoil while positioning itself as an indispensable mediator. Eitan will speak for about 15 minutes, followed by a 15-minute Q&A session. So if you'd like to ask a question, please feel free to use the Q&A or chat function at the bottom of your screens to enter your submission, and we'll do our best to get to as many as possible. Please do limit your submissions to questions only. Today's podcast is being recorded and will be available for future viewing, so please do share the link with those in your networks who would be interested in learning more on this timely topic. Welcome, Eitan, and thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. I hand the floor over to you.
Thank you for having me. So I should just dive in on the on the Qatar issue and sort of the threats that it faces. So I think what people need to understand about Qatar, for those who are unfamiliar, or for those who only consume mainstream legacy media and therefore may be given an inaccurate picture, Qatar is actually, despite how it likes to portray itself as a key U.S. ally in the Middle East, it is actually a strategic threat, not just to the security of the United States, but to the social fabric that binds all of the West and all Americans together. Qatar likes to portray itself as the firefighter. It likes to portray itself as the government of as the regime that puts out all of the conflicts in the region. All the conflicts that are started, Qatar is always there to mediate, to negotiate. Qatar likes to extol the virtues of diplomacy and mutual understanding and peace. But on the flip side, Qatar is actually the one, oftentimes funding a lot of these conflicts, or backing the actors in these conflicts. And so it's duplicitous. It's a regime that thrives on putting these fires out in the Middle East specifically, and then reining them in, and then taking all of the plaudits and all the accolades for doing so. An example that obviously it's close to home probably for many of you in the audience is the issue of Hamas and Israel. So Hamas has been backed by Qatar and Iran primarily for well over a decade, and a lot longer than that. Qatar has funded hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars into Hamas. It's hosted its regime, its leaders in Doha, and these fancy hotels in the Ritz and in the Waldorf and all these fancy hotels over in Doha. It gives them prime media coverage with Al Jazeera, which is one of the biggest networks on planet Earth. So it's really just done everything in its power to prop up this regime, this terror regime in Gaza. And even now, after Israel has thoroughly decimated Hamas in the Gaza Strip, Qatar is still out there trying to do whatever it can to save what's left of Hamas and ensure that it plays an integral role in ruling whatever is the next iteration of the government in Gaza, whether it's an international stabilization force or you name it. Qatar is doing everything in its power to ensure that Hamas is running the show over there. I think in terms of, just to bring it back to what I was talking about at the outset, about how Qatar is a threat to the United States in particular, what it does is it, in addition to propping up these terrorist organizations that have taken the lives of numerous American citizens, and not just Israelis and Americans, but Europeans and Australians and people from Latin America, you name it. It also plays a very important role in protecting the Iranian regime from any sort of truly, devastating consequences from the United States. So Qatar and Iran share a vast natural gas field that they share. So they're very close, because of that. They have this sort of mutual interest in ensuring the physical safety of their territory, but also they both harbor the same radical Islamist agenda. Even though Qatar and Iran, there's the Sunni Shia divide, and Qatar is very much ensconced in the Muslim Brotherhood ideology, whereas Iran is more in the Shia Islam side of things. They have this mutual agenda of thwarting and subverting and ultimately dismantling Western civilization in and of itself. Over the last few months alone, Qatar has they have these frequent meetings, the Qatari officials with Iranian officials, where they sign all these big multi-billion-dollar contracts for technology and communications and natural gas and schooling and education and you name it. Just a few weeks ago, there was a big conference in Tehran where Qatari officials, the prime minister and the foreign minister, they spoke at this conference, and the conference had the big banner of the conference. I remember this very vividly. It was the Statue of Liberty, but she was decaying. She was wrapped in the American flag, and she was decaying. She was falling over, and if I'm not mistaken, there may have even been missiles raining down upon her. Someone will surely fact check me on that, but it was very emblematic of Qatar's actual agenda. Qatar has also funded universities to the tune of billions of dollars as a means to radicalize American youth to be ensconced in this sort of decolonial anti-American agenda that's part and parcel of this Muslim Brotherhood worldview. Northwestern University is a prime example of that, and the Middle East Forum actually, not to plug you guys, but they you guys put out a really amazing report. It must have been 2 months ago about how Northwestern University's campus in Qatar serves as a vehicle for this radicalization, because Qatar has actually invested or funded six key. They fund dozens of universities in the United States, but six key ones in particular that actually have campuses in Doha, in the capital of Qatar, they have expertise in particular niches. So Northwestern is journalism, Georgetown is in government and foreign policy, et cetera, et cetera. And your report, if I recall, painted a really incredible picture of how the professors that are in the Northwestern Doha campus that are all based in the Middle East, they come from Iran and Qatar and Yemen and, you name it. They're actually radicalizing the students also on the Northwestern campus in Evanston, Illinois. And I think what really is striking to me about Qatar's agenda, most importantly, is on the civilizational level, about how they're trying to fray Western civilization and the United States from within. So Qatari officials and Qatari media in English will oftentimes, put out statements and put out content that says, we love America, America's great, we're partners, everything's, amazing. We're very strategically allied two countries. But on the other hand, their media will put out content that's all about how America is a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad place. So, for example, just over the Thanksgiving weekend, Al Jazeera Plus, which is one of these subsidiaries of Al Jazeera, which is their state-run outlet, put out a video about how Thanksgiving is actually, quote unquote, a national day of mourning, because the United States is built on colonization and genocide. So that is not the type of content that an ally of the United States would be putting out, a true ally of the United States would be putting out in their state-run media. Other things that they've done is talk about the need to abolish the police force, and the fact that, what they do is they find these highly contentious social issues and they flare them up and they constantly talk about them in these inflammatory ways to get Americans to fight with each other. And, ultimately, like I keep saying, dismantle the civilization from within. Qatar doesn't have a lot of hard power. They have enormous economic assets, but they know that they can't defeat the West militarily or economically even, so that they'll do what, is the classic Brotherhood or KGB modus operandi, which is try to get Americans to turn on each other. And it's very insidious, and it's a huge issue that I wish more people would take seriously. Here in Israel, we fail to take it, seriously enough. And look what happened with Gaza and Hamas. We put a little bit too much trust into Qatar. Oh, it's fine, just send funds to Gaza so that it's stabilized and there's no conflict there, and everything will be fine. And that came back to bite us in Israel. And so I'm very afraid that the same thing could happen to the United States as well. And I think, there's a lot more to be said, and I can go off in a million different directions, but I'm also happy to open it up to questions at this point. I can also talk about various other things, but for the sake of timing.
No, thank you, Eitan. That's a good intro, and there are some people that are submitting questions. I'm going to actually take the liberty as the moderator to ask the first. You posted on X a clip of the former Qatari Prime Minister Hamad bin Jassim, if I'm
Sure.
pronouncing that properly, discussing the fact that they had journalists in countries all over the world on their payroll. And since the podcast today is on how there is sort of this doublespeak and how they use Al Jazeera to that end, can you explain how exactly this plays out in the U.S.? My, but the first aspect of that is if they do have journalists um, on the payroll in the U.S. in particular, isn't that a FARA violation? And then also, I'm going to take it a step further to Tucker Carlson because a lot of people believe that Tucker is on Qatar's payroll because how else can you explain his sick obsession with his anti-Semitic and anti-Israel rhetoric and guests? So, what are your thoughts on all of that?
Tucker. Okay, well, how much time do we have? No, so the thing is Qatar is extremely adept at this. They've been doing this longer and better than almost anyone else. If anyone thinks that they're going to find a paper trail where money is physically exchanging hands from Qatar to a journalist, they've got another thing coming, and they're looking in the wrong place. That's not how it's going to happen. It'll always be in more subtle ways. Oh, we're not going to pay you, but physically, but we'll invite you to our conferences, and maybe you'll get a speaker's honorarium, or we'll invite you to the Grand Prix, the Formula One giant racing event that was over the weekend in Qatar just yesterday. We'll invite you to that. So we're not going to pay you, but maybe we'll fly you out to see this cool race thing, and what happens there behind the scenes, I don't know, but you see what I'm saying? It's all very malleable. It's you're never going to find the paper trail. Theoretically, law enforcement can find a paper trail, but they're not going to start looking into every journalist who says something positive about Qatar and negative about Israel. So I would get off that Tucker train. I mean, Tucker promoting anti-Israelism, anti-Americanism, talking about how much Sharia law is actually not so bad, or maybe the communist dictator of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, he's socially conservative, so maybe we should support him. I would focus on that. I would focus on the fact that he's promoting anti-American, anti-Semitic narratives and not try to pin him on any sort of FARA violation. That said, there is a ton of evidence that Qatar is engaged in what we've been talking about, which is the sort of nefarious attempt to get celebrities and influencers and journalists to promote their agenda, whether they realize it or not. So I remember this must have been 2018, there was an article that has been going around recently about how Qatar targeted 250 Trump influencers to change U.S. policy. And I remember reading in the Washington Examiner just earlier this year that conservative media were targeted by Qatari lobbyists 10 times as much as they were during the Biden years. They're targeted now during the Trump years 10 times more than they were during the Biden years. Obviously, we have the Qatari prime minister, the former one, talking about how they pay journalists all over the world. That goes without saying. And I actually have some handy dandy notes here because I put out a Substack article a couple of months back, kind of crunching the numbers so that you can understand the true scope of Qatar's influence by the numbers. And I know that I'm going off on a tangent, but it's really, really important. So again, these are just all hard facts numbers, and it'll, I think, blow some of your minds. Qatar is the single largest foreign funder of American universities with $6.3 billion in the last 20 years alone. Qatar's total U.S. footprint in terms of business so far is $93.7 billion, and it's about to go up to over $1 trillion after Trump recently signed a couple of deals when he was there a few months back. Qatar has 31 FARA registrants in the United States, with 22 of them based in the Washington, D.C. and surrounding areas, which is the highest concentration of any major lobbying country in D.C. So what are they all doing there? They're all, the lobbyists, the army of lobbyists is out of this world. Since 2016, Qatar has spent $250 million on 88 lobbying and PR firms and logging 627 in-person political meetings over the last 4 years, far outpacing any other country. And according to Open Secrets, the top spenders on FARA registrants since 2016, China has spent the most at about $460 million, and Qatar is next with $258 million. So in other words, the effort that Qatar is putting into influencing the American public and the political arena is unparalleled, out of this world. And it's important that people understand these numbers so they can fight this with the facts.
Thanks for that. Eitan, there's a number of people that are asking, I'm going to sort of combine a couple questions. Does Trump understand the issues that are tied to Qatar and I guess, national security concerns? And in that context, he did sign this executive order, to label the Muslim Brotherhood as a foreign terrorist designation. But Turkey and Qatar were not specified the way that Egypt, what was it, Egypt, Syria, I don't remember that the three countries that were, but people were wondering how the executive order ties into Qatar and its relationship with the Muslim Brotherhood, it being a Muslim.
Sure. So, like probably most of the people listening, I cannot get into Trump's head. He is a unique figure in global political life and in history. I don't know what he's thinking. I think that anyone who says that they know what he's thinking probably doesn't know what he's thinking, so I don't know about that. He's definitely aware of Qatar's funding of terror. He's on record talking about it during his first term. So I'm sure that that issue is still something that's being discussed, but I obviously don't know where his head is at. In terms of the designation, it's complicated. So obviously it's starting off slow because the Muslim Brotherhood is a very decentralized movement, right? It doesn't have it has official chapters in some countries like Egypt, but there is no official Muslim Brotherhood chapter in Qatar and in Turkey. And so putting them in this initial designation, it would kind of be very easy to overturn it or to blow holes in it, because it would weaken the argument, right? An argument is only as strong as the weakest link. And so I think what the administration is trying to do here is go for the clear-cut cases. And I think FDD has written about this as well, the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. I think that the idea is to go for the lowest hanging fruit, which is Egypt and those other two countries whose names escape me. And then from there, work your way up to Qatar and Turkey. And obviously, because although the movement of the Brotherhood is decentralized, there are still operatives and Brotherhood-linked bodies in Qatar. One of the most influential ones is the Union of Islamic Scholars, which is the organization that Yusuf al-Qaradawi, the spiritual leader of the Muslim Brotherhood before he died, used to lead. So that's a very clear-cut Brotherhood organization. So that will likely be affected by the designation. So even if there isn't, even if Qatar isn't explicitly named in the designation per se, there will be impact, and we'll see how things play out. And the time will tell, and I think we're all very curious to see what happens.
Someone actually asked where the plane that Qatar gave to Trump ties into all of this. Do you think that that's had an influence on his policies?
Um, I'm not sure Trump thinks like that, honestly. I mean, maybe again, I don't know
Yeah.
how. I can't really get into his head. I would say that it definitely helps. It definitely helps. Trump, like any normal person, would like the country. Like I would love a $400 million jet. So if someone decided to give me that, I'd probably like them too. But I think that there are people in the administration and people that I've spoken to, and obviously the public is well aware of how shady it all seems. There was obviously a lot of public outrage from both sides of the aisle about this jet thing. There was also similar public outrage when it was announced that Qatar was going to open some sort of not airbase facility in Iowa or Idaho. I don't remember which state it was. So there was
I
similar
don't.
outrage, bipartisan. You're right, and so I think that the public is well aware of what's going on, and I trust the administration, and I hope the administration is cognizant of this sort of potential duplicitous agenda that Qatar has, and like I said, time will tell.
Someone actually asked about the base that Qatar wants to build here. Do you have any further insight into that? Why would they want a base here?
So for years, Qatar has been collaborating with the United States on air defenses. Qatar is very serious about its air defenses because despite its enormous influence on global politics and specifically in the United States, it's actually a very small country and its local population is only 300,000 people. The rest of the population are either foreign workers or people that are there in de facto indentured servitude, because Qatar is horrible to its migrant workers, and they have like a two-tiered system where basically the 300,000 Qataris have one set of laws, and then the rest of the people, which are about a few million, have another set of laws. And so they don't really have a standing military, or what they do, but it's very, very small and ineffective. So they care a lot about their air defenses, and so I assume that this is just another way to get more of that, to increase the collaboration on air defenses, learn more about how to fight potential Israeli strikes theoretically on the territory, or rogue Iranian missiles, which, whatever. I mean, I don't think Iran is a threat to Qatar, obviously. And I think that Qatar has been trying to shore up its security. Qatar knows that mutual security interests are the most important thing to ensure its safety. And so that's why it also really lobbied hard to get the major non-NATO ally status under Biden, because that effectively, again, gives it a lot more security. And also, I think the executive order that Trump signed a few months back also de facto gives Qatar NATO Article 5 status, so that an attack on Qatar is going to be treated like an attack on the United States. So it's all about its security.
So you brought up the population of 300,000 and the rest being foreign workers. Somebody asked about that and how vulnerable that makes Qatar. Do you see that as a vulnerability?
I think that they've done an excellent job at turning that vulnerability into its greatest strength, because what was that? It must have been, was it Golda Meir maybe, who had a great saying about Israel, that, Israel has this one ace up its sleeve that no other country has, which is that we have nowhere else to go. Like, Israel is our last stand. So us Israelis, we have nowhere else to go. If things really go to hell in a handbasket. And I think Qatar realized, okay, we're 300,000 people. We are not going to, we will not have the military might that some of our neighbors may have, but we have the economic might, and we're going to use that to ensure that we have this strategic advantage. So, and I think they've done a very effective job at, like I said, creating a sort of two-tiered system. I think that Qatar is very stable, unfortunately.
Thank you. Someone asked if you know how long Qatar's gas supply will last. Certainly,
For the
that's the
sake of
means to funding
this
all of this.
discussion, let's just say ad infinitum. I mean, forever and ever and ever. I mean, it's. I would not expect it to dwindle anytime soon. But they're also they're making all these inroads in so many other avenues, right? Like, they're hosting the Formula One Grand Prix every year. They're investing with Google to create some sort of AI apparatus, which is very, very frightening. They have there was this big Doha Film Festival a few weeks ago, and all the CEOs of the major Hollywood corporations were there. Like, they're in every arena, and they're investing everywhere. So even if theoretically, they lose that advantage from the natural gas and oil, like, they'll be set. So economically, unfortunately, they're not going anywhere.
Somebody asked who the beneficiaries in the West of the deals that Trump has facilitated with Qatar are. They said certainly not the man in the street in the U.S. benefits particularly much from this. So I guess they're asking who the beneficiaries are.
I guess whatever industries they're investing in are the industries that will benefit. So if they're working on air defenses, then the air defense industry will boom. And Qatar actually owns a ton of real estate in the United States. So whoever's in real estate will do well. Whoever's managing properties will do well. The idea, Qatar is very clever because, like, if they're investing $1 trillion in the economy of the United States, their logic is, listen, we're creating jobs. What do you want from us? And they're hoping that the administration and the American public will say, listen, we don't love that they're funding radical Islamic terrorism and that they're trying to indoctrinate all of our youth on university campuses and on TikTok, but they are helping us get jobs. And again, just to play devil's advocate, it's really effective, right? Because everyone wants jobs and everyone wants a booming economy. And so it's really, really clever, and it's very frightening what you can do with enough money. But I just hope that, that doesn't trump the sort of moral and strategic imperative here, which is that the money isn't everything. You see these university students being indoctrinated, and they're going out there and marching in the streets and globalizing the Intifada. That doesn't exist in a vacuum. There's an entire ideological infrastructure that is pushing them in that direction, and that infrastructure is pushed by China, by Russia, by Iran, and obviously by Qatar, which is playing a huge role in that. And by the way, I mean, maybe if someone asked the question of Al Jazeera is kind of my thing. I've kind of made it my own personal jihad to go after Al Jazeera. So if there's a question about Al Jazeera, I'm also happy to address that issue.
Well, yeah, I mean, so I'll raise one because the past weekend, and I
Please.
think you actually, I think you were talking about this on X, that they convened an academic conference on international media and the war on Gaza, which was actually a
At
propaganda event.
Northwestern, sure, yeah, of course. At Northwestern, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm not sure where it was, but
Okay, then fine.
but it was basically, it whitewashed the 10/7 atrocities. It literally called the rape, murder, burning, and beheading of Israelis false reports. So, how can a country that denies the atrocities of 10/7 be an ally of the U.S.? And again, this was an Al Jazeera sponsored conference, but Al Jazeera and Qatar are basically one and the same.
Sure. Okay, so first of all, now I remember what you're talking about. I thought it was Northwestern because there were two Northwestern Qatar professors who were speaking there, which is
Yeah, I
insane
think it was
because you
in.
have American. It was in Doha, but their professors were there. That's why I got confused. I don't think they can be an ally. I think that, listen, when you're in international politics, you have to have like in international relations. The operative word there is relations. You have to have relations with countries, but the relationship with Qatar is unbelievable to me. You have this regime that is denying what happened on October 7th, and in some cases they're gloating about what happened on October 7th, and they're treated as an ally. To me, it's grossly immoral, and it's horrific. Did you know that Al Jazeera actually produced an SNL style skit of October 7th? They called it the Apricot Dome, to mock the Iron Dome and how it didn't manage to defend Israel on October 7th properly, and it was I kid you not, a 3-minute skit, like out of Saturday Night Live, and they're just laughing at what happened, and they have like mock reenactments of the massacre, but everyone's like laughing, and I mean, I feel gross even talking about it, but it's crazy to me. And Al Jazeera is their key vehicle for promoting this type of propaganda, and Al Jazeera, despite being mandated. Yeah, I mentioned before Al Jazeera Plus, which is their sort of like US based subsidiary. The Department of Justice under Trump 1.0 mandated that they register as a foreign agent in September of 2020 because they said, listen, you are run by the Qatari government. We see that you're run by the Qatari government. Every editorial that you do is the Qatari government. You have to register as a foreign agent so that the American public knows what kind of media they're consuming. And Qatar has just said, no, we're not going to do that. And there have been no repercussions about it. So you continue to have this type of content of these SNL skits of October 7th being just spoon fed to the American public, and nobody seems to care about it. And to me, it's horrifying, and it's if people don't wake up, every other countries are going to do this as well. Turkey has started doing this type of thing with TRT World and Anadolu Agency. China's been doing this. Russia's been doing this. They're using the media to indoctrinate, American youth, and the only people that seem to care about it are the people. I don't know, the people who I don't know. I mean, people care about it, but for some reason, nothing's changing. It's very, very frightening. But listen, we have to continue making noise about it and ensuring that there is accountability and that the Qatar does not retain this sort of like glowing ally status that it has. Something has to change.
Someone asked about Al Gore's. Al Gore used to own Al Jazeera, right? And he sold it. Do you know the history of his
I will plead
relationship?
ignorance. I don't
Okay,
know
yeah,
what's going on there. I know that Qatar has like Al Jazeera has dozens of bodies and subsidiaries all over the world, so it
yeah.
could be.
And then this is an interesting question that someone posed. Any chance that demographics will stem this tide in time? Specifically, what is the young generation of Qataris like?
So I've been following Qatari social media. That's where I get a lot of my leads for stories. They are very, very homogenized in everything that they do. And Qatar has a very strict control over education and media. So the only voices we're ever really going to hear are the voices that are supportive of the regime. So I genuinely cannot tell you what the authentic Qatari voice is. What I can tell you is that there's a law, it's either Article 76 or 79 of one of their basic laws that lays out all the dictates of what you can post on social media and in the media. And there are clauses there like you can't criticize Islam, you can't criticize the regime, and you can't post anything that would harm the social cohesion of the country, which is incredibly vague and could basically be applied to anyone and anything and everywhere in Qatar. So all of what I see all day on Qatari social media is them just fawning over the regime. And I don't see that being about to change. But just an anecdote, a few months ago, there's a little local Baha'i population. Baha'i is a faith here in the Middle East, one of the faiths, and they have a small population in Qatar. And one of the leader of the local Baha'i community in Qatar criticized the ruling family in some way, and he was actually arrested, and he's going to serve in prison now for several years just for criticizing the regime. So if there's any authentic voice in opposition to the regime, we likely won't see it anytime soon.
Thank you, Eitan. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. There are a couple more questions that were in the queue, but apologies. We like to stay to the schedule. And I appreciate you taking the time to join us this afternoon, as well as our audience.
My pleasure.
Where is the best place for people to follow your work? Is it your,
On X,
yeah,
it's at Fischberger. That's Fischberger. Any of the questions that you guys feel like asking, feel free to shoot them my way in DM or just write it to me on Twitter. I'm happy to try to respond.
terrific. Thank you so much. I hope you all can join us on Wednesday with Israel Insider featuring Ashley Perry at 3 p.m. And we thank you for joining, Eitan. Thank you again. I wish everybody a wonderful afternoon.